What happens when a simple act of human kindness ripples across the galaxy? When a 12-year-old boy's instinct to help a stranger becomes the catalyst for humanity's first contact with an ancient galactic civilization. In a universe where most species see compassion as weakness, humans possess something extraordinary: the willingness to risk everything for a complete stranger. This is the story of Marcus Chen, an ordinary kid from Portland whose split-second decision to help a dying alien would forever change not just his life, but the destiny of every human being on Earth. Sometimes the smallest acts of courage echo the loudest across the cosmos. Sometimes a child's heart beats with the rhythm that moves entire civilizations. This is one of those times. Marcus Chen had always been the kind of kid who noticed things others missed. While his classmates rushed past the homeless man outside their middle school, Marcus would slow down and nod respectfully. When his younger sister Sarah dropped her lunch money, he'd pick it up without being asked. His mom often said he had an old soul trapped in a 12-year-old body, though she never realized just how prophetic those words would prove to be. The October afternoon started like any other in Portland. Gray clouds hung low over the city, threatening rain that never quite arrived. Marcus walked through Pioneer Courthouse Square after his violin lesson, his instrument case bumping against his legs with each step. The square buzzed with its usual mix of street performers, office workers grabbing coffee, and tourists taking pictures of the bronze elephant statue. That's when he saw the old man. The stranger sat hunched on a bench near the Max Light rail station, his weathered hands clutching his chest. Most people would have assumed he was just another homeless person, but something about his posture made Marcus pause. The man's breathing came in short, desperate gasps, and his dark skin had taken on a grayish pallor that made Marcus think of his grandfather's final days. "Mister," Marcus approached cautiously, setting down his violin case. "Are you okay?" The old man looked up, and Marcus nearly stumbled backward. The stranger's eyes weren't quite right. They seemed to shift color in the fading light, moving from deep brown to an almost golden hue. But it was the pain in those eyes that stopped Marcus cold. This wasn't someone asking for spare change. This was someone dying. "Can't breathe," the man wheezed, his accent thick and unfamiliar. Heart-stopping. Marcus didn't hesitate. His mother worked as a nurse at OHSU, and she'd made sure both her children knew basic first aid. He'd never performed CPR on a real person before, only on the practice dummies at the community center, but his hands moved with surprising confidence. "I'm going to help you," Marcus said, pulling out his phone with one hand while kneeling beside the bench. "Someone call 911, he shouted to the growing crowd of onlookers. The old man's eyes rolled back and he slumped forward. Marcus caught him, surprised by how light he felt despite his apparent age. As he lowered the stranger to the ground, Marcus noticed something odd about the man's wrist. What looked like a tattoo seemed to be moving, shifting patterns of symbols that definitely weren't from any earthly language. But there wasn't time to wonder about strange tattoos. The man's pulse was fading fast. Marcus positioned his hands on the stranger's chest and began compressions, counting aloud like his mother had taught him. 1, 2, 3. The crowd around them grew larger, but no one else stepped forward to help. A few people held up phones, recording rather than calling for emergency services. "Did someone actually call 911? Marcus demanded, not breaking his rhythm. "I did," called a woman in a business suit. "They're on their way." Marcus tilted the man's head back and gave 2 rescue breaths, tasting something metallic and strange on the stranger's lips. The man's skin felt oddly warm, almost fevered, despite his apparent cardiac distress. Marcus returned to chest compressions, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool October air. "Come on," Marcus muttered. "Don't give up on me." After what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, the old man's eyes fluttered open. He drew a shuddering breath, then another. Color began returning to his features, though Marcus noticed his skin seemed to shimmer slightly, like oil on water. "You," the stranger whispered, his hand reaching up to touch Marcus's face. "You saved." "Don't try to talk," Marcus said, though he felt relief flooding through him. "The ambulance is coming. You're going to be okay." But the old man shook his head slowly. "No hospital," he said with surprising firmness. They would not understand." "You just had a heart attack," Marcus protested. "You need medical attention." The stranger's grip on Marcus's arm was surprisingly strong. "What is your name, young healer?" "Marcus Chen." "But I'm not a healer, Marcus Chen?" the old man repeated, as if committing it to memory. "I am Zarek Thorm, and you, Marcus Chen, have just changed the fate of 2 worlds." Before Marcus could ask what that meant, the ambulance arrived, its sirens cutting through the murmur of the crowd. The paramedics took over, efficiently assessing Zarek's condition while asking Marcus questions about what had happened. Throughout it all, Zarek's golden eyes remained fixed on Marcus's face, studying him with an intensity that made the boy uncomfortable. "His vitals are stabilizing," one of the paramedics reported. "Sir, we need to get you to the hospital for a complete cardiac workup." Zarek shook his head weakly. "I am recovering." "Thank you, but I cannot." "You can't refuse treatment after a cardiac event," the paramedic insisted. "You could have another episode." While the medical team argued with their reluctant patient, Marcus noticed something that made his breath catch. The strange markings on Zarek's wrist were definitely moving now, flowing like liquid text across his skin. And unless Marcus was imagining things, they seemed to be getting brighter. "Marcus," Zarek called out as the paramedics prepared to load him onto a gurney. "Tomorrow, Pioneer Courthouse Square. Same time, important." "I don't think," Marcus began. "Please," Zarek's voice carried a weight that seemed impossible for someone who'd just been near death. "What you did today, it cannot go unrewarded. There are those who must know of your courage." The paramedics wheeled Zarek away, still arguing with him about the necessity of hospital care. The crowd began to disperse, leaving Marcus alone with his violin case and a head full of questions. He replayed the encounter in his mind as he walked home, trying to make sense of what he'd witnessed. The moving tattoos could have been a trick of the light. The strange taste during mouth-to-mouth resuscitation could have been medication or illness. The odd shimmer to Zarek's skin might have been perspiration. Marcus tried to rationalize everything he'd seen, but deep down, he knew something extraordinary had happened. When he arrived home, his mother was waiting in the kitchen preparing dinner. Linda Chen looked up from chopping vegetables, immediately noticing her son's thoughtful expression. "How was violin lesson?" she asked. "It was good," Marcus said automatically. Then he paused, considering whether to tell her about the incident in the square. His mother would want to know if he'd been involved in a medical emergency, but she'd also worry if he told her about Zarek's strange appearance and mysterious words. "Actually, Mom, something happened on the way home," he began, and found himself telling her everything, except the parts about the moving tattoos and the shimmer to Zarek's skin. Those details seemed too impossible to share, even with his understanding mother. Linda listened with growing concern and pride. When Marcus finished his account, she pulled him into a tight hug. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered. "You did exactly the right thing. But next time something like that happens, please be careful. Make sure other adults are helping too." There were lots of people around, Marcus assured her, and the paramedics got there really fast. "Good." Linda held him at arm's length, studying his face. "Are you okay? That must have been scary." Marcus nodded, though he wasn't entirely sure that scary was the right word. Confusing, maybe. Significant, definitely. But not scary in the way his mother meant. That night, Marcus lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about Zarek Thorn's golden eyes and cryptic words. "You have just changed the fate of 2 worlds. What could that possibly mean? And why had the old man been so insistent about meeting again tomorrow? Sleep came slowly, filled with dreams of shifting patterns and voices speaking in languages that seemed familiar despite being completely foreign. In his dreams, Marcus stood in a vast chamber filled with beings who looked almost human but moved with an otherworldly grace. They watched him with curious, respectful eyes as a voice echoed through the space, "The compassionate one has been found." Marcus woke with a start, sunlight streaming through his bedroom window. He checked his phone and realized he'd overslept. It was Saturday, so missing school wasn't a concern, but he had promised to help his father with yard work. As he got dressed, Marcus found his thoughts returning to the previous day's events and Zarek's request to meet again. Part of him wanted to dismiss the whole encounter as a one-time good deed and move on with his life. But another part, the part that had noticed things others missed, knew that whatever had happened yesterday was far from over. At breakfast, Marcus pushed his cereal around his bowl while his parents discussed weekend plans. His father, David, was an engineer who approached problems with methodical precision. His mother balanced her medical training with an intuitive understanding of people. Both of them had raised their children to be curious about the world while maintaining healthy skepticism about things that seemed too good to be true. "You're quiet this morning," his father observed. "Still thinking about yesterday?" Marcus nodded. "The man I helped asked me to meet him again today. Same place, same time." His parents exchanged glances. "That's not necessarily a good idea," Linda said carefully. "While it's natural for him to want to thank you, meeting strangers repeatedly can be... People aren't always what they seem, Marcus. Even people you've helped." "But what if he really does want to thank me?" Marcus asked. "What if it's important?" "Then he can send a thank you card," his mother said with finality. "Or if it's really important, he can contact us through proper channels." "You're 12 years old, Marcus. You're not required to handle adult situations alone." Marcus knew his parents were right, but something about their response bothered him. They were treating this like a normal situation, but nothing about Zarek Thorne had felt normal. The way he'd looked at Marcus, the strange patterns on his skin, the intensity of his final words, none of it fit the profile of a confused elderly man looking to express simple gratitude. "What if I don't go alone?" Marcus suggested. "What if you come with me?" "We'll think about it," David said, which Marcus recognized as parent speak for probably not. His mind kept wandering to Pioneer Courthouse Square and the questions he couldn't answer. By 3 o'clock, he'd made a decision. "Dad, I'm going to ride my bike to Powell's Books," he announced. "I want to find something about first aid and CPR." David looked pleased. "That's a great idea. Learning more about emergency medical care is always worthwhile. Be back by 5 for dinner." Marcus nodded and headed for the garage, knowing he was technically lying but telling himself he'd stop by Powell's after visiting the square. The ride downtown took 20 minutes, giving him plenty of time to wonder if he was making a huge mistake. Pioneer Courthouse Square looked different in the afternoon sunlight. The same mix of people moved through the space, but Marcus felt like he was seeing everything through new eyes. He locked his bike to a rack and walked toward the bench where he'd found Zarek the day before. The old man was already there, looking remarkably healthy for someone who'd nearly died less than 24 hours earlier. He wore a long coat that seemed too heavy for the mild weather, and his earlier pallor had been replaced by an almost luminous vitality. "Marcus Chen," Zarek said, rising as the boy approached. "I was not certain you would come." "I almost didn't," Marcus admitted. "My parents think meeting strange adults isn't safe." "Your parents are wise," Zarek replied. "In most circumstances, their caution would be correct. But these are not most circumstances." Up close, Marcus could see that the strange markings were still visible on Zarek's wrist, though they'd faded to a faint silver tracery against his skin. They weren't moving now, but they definitely weren't tattoos. They looked more like circuitry or maybe some kind of biological pattern. "What are those?" Marcus asked, pointing to Zarek's wrist. Zarek followed his gaze and smiled. "Evidence," he said simply. "Proof that yesterday's events were more significant than they appeared." "Evidence of what?" Instead of answering directly, Zarek gestured toward a quieter area of the square. "Walk with me, Marcus Chen. What I have to tell you requires privacy, and what I must show you requires trust." Marcus felt every warning his parents had ever given him about stranger danger, but something about Zarek's manner seemed genuinely non-threatening. The old man moved with careful dignity, keeping appropriate distance and making no attempts to rush or pressure him. They found a spot near the edge of the square where foot traffic was lighter. Zarek sat on a low wall and invited Marcus to join him. "What happened yesterday," Zarek began, "was not a simple medical emergency. What you witnessed was the result of a translation error.
Translation error? My real people do not have the same physiology as humans.
When we take human form, certain biological functions must be artificially maintained. Yesterday, those systems failed. Marcus stared at him. Your real people? What does that mean? Zarek was quiet for a long moment, studying Marcus's face as if trying to determine how much truth the boy could handle. Finally, he made a decision. I am not from Earth, Marcus Chen. The words hung in the air between them. Marcus waited for the punchline, or for Zarek to admit he was joking, or for some other explanation that would make the impossible statement make sense. You're an alien, Marcus said flatly. That is the term humans use, yes. And yesterday I gave CPR to an alien. Yesterday you saved the life of a keeper of the Galactic Council, Zarek corrected. A representative of a civilization that has existed for over 50,000 of your years. Marcus stood up abruptly. This was too much, too fast, too impossible. Look, mister, I don't know what game you're playing, but… No game, Zarek interrupted gently. He held up his wrist, and Marcus watched in stunned silence as the silver markings began to glow and move, forming complex patterns that definitely weren't human in origin. No tricks, no deception. Only truth, as fantastic as that truth may seem. The patterns on Zarek's skin pulsed with soft light, and Marcus felt something shift in his perception. The sounds of the city seemed to fade, replaced by a subtle harmony that reminded him of his violin lessons. The air itself seemed to shimmer with possibilities. This is impossible, Marcus whispered. Many things seem impossible until they happen, Zarek replied. Your species has a saying, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. What you're seeing is not magic, Marcus. It is simply technology your world has not yet discovered. Why are you telling me this? Because yesterday you demonstrated something my people have not seen in over 3 centuries of contact with developing civilizations. What? Selfless compassion toward a complete stranger. You did not hesitate when you saw someone in need. You did not calculate the risk to yourself or wonder what you might gain. You simply acted to preserve life because life has value. Marcus sat back down, his legs suddenly unsteady. Other people would have done the same thing. Would they? Zarek asked. How many passed by before you stopped? How many took pictures instead of calling for help? How many stepped forward to assist you during those critical minutes? Marcus thought about the crowd that had gathered, the phones pointed in his direction, the business-suited woman who had called 910 but done nothing else. He had to admit Zarek had a point. Most species, Zarek continued, develop intelligence alongside self-preservation instincts that override compassion when facing the unknown. They help their own kind, their families, their communities. But extending aid to complete strangers, especially strangers who appear different or alien, is extraordinarily rare. So what happens now? Zarek smiled, and for the first time since they'd met, he looked genuinely happy. Now, Marcus Chen, your world is about to change in ways you cannot imagine. The transformation didn't happen all at once. Marcus returned home that evening with Zarek's words echoing in his mind. But his world looked exactly the same. His mother still made her famous Saturday night tacos. His father still grumbled about the neighbor's dog barking too early in the morning. His sister Sarah still monopolized the bathroom for an unreasonable amount of time. But Marcus felt different. It was like looking at a familiar painting and suddenly noticing details that had always been there but somehow invisible before. The way shadows fell seemed more significant. The patterns in the clouds appeared almost deliberate. Even the hum of the refrigerator sounded like it might be trying to communicate something. You're distracted tonight, his mother observed over dinner. Everything okay? Marcus poked at his taco, trying to figure out how to explain what couldn't be explained. Just thinking about stuff? The man you helped yesterday? David asked. Yeah. I saw him again today. His parents exchanged that look again, the one that meant they were having a silent conversation about their son's well-being. Where did you see him? Linda asked carefully. At the square. He wanted to thank me properly. Marcus chose his words with deliberate precision. He told me about his family, his background. He's from pretty far away. This was technically true if you considered another planet to be far away. Did he seem stable? His mother pressed, her nursing instincts clearly engaged. Sometimes people who've had cardiac events experience confusion or disorientation. Really healthy, actually, like nothing had happened. That's unusual, Linda frowned. People don't usually bounce back from cardiac arrest that quickly. Marcus almost mentioned the glowing patterns on Zarek's wrist, then caught himself. His parents were already concerned about his interaction with a stranger. Telling them the stranger claimed to be an alien would probably result in therapy sessions and locked bedroom doors. Maybe it wasn't as serious as it looked, he said instead. Maybe, his mother agreed, but she didn't sound convinced. That night, Marcus lay awake trying to make sense of everything Zarek had told him. Part of him wondered if the old man was simply delusional, maybe suffering from some kind of breakdown that manifested as elaborate alien fantasies. But the rational part of his mind couldn't explain away what he'd seen with his own eyes. The moving patterns, the way Zarek's appearance had shifted, the subtle wrongness that made him seem not quite human. Around midnight, Marcus was startled by a soft tapping at his bedroom window. He lived on the second floor, so the sound made no sense unless a bird had flown into the glass. But when he pulled back the curtains, he found himself looking at a small device hovering outside, no bigger than his fist and glowing with the same soft light he'd seen on Zarek's wrist. Marcus stared at the impossible object for several long seconds before carefully opening his window. The device floated inside like it weighed nothing, rotating slowly to reveal surfaces covered in the same flowing script he'd seen on Zarek's arm. "Hello, Marcus Chen." The device spoke in Zarek's voice, though the old man was nowhere to be seen. "If you are hearing this message, it means the preliminary scans have confirmed what we suspected. You are exactly what we have been searching for." "What the hell?" Marcus whispered, grabbing the floating device. It felt warm and oddly alive in his hands. "Please do not be alarmed," Zarek's voice continued. "This is simply a communication device. Think of it as a very advanced telephone. I am speaking to you from a ship currently positioned above your planet's atmosphere." Marcus nearly dropped the device. A spaceship. Zarek was talking to him from an actual spaceship orbiting Earth. "The scans we conducted during our encounter yesterday revealed something extraordinary about your biology," the message continued. "Humans, as a species, possess certain neural pathways that are extremely rare among intelligent life forms. These pathways govern what you might call empathy, the ability to understand and share the emotions of others, even others who are completely different from yourself." Marcus sank onto his bed, still clutching the glowing device. "Most species develop empathy only for their own kind," Zarek's voice explained. "It is an evolutionary advantage that promotes group survival, but in humans these pathways have evolved beyond typical parameters. You have the capacity for what we call universal empathy, the ability to extend compassion to any conscious being, regardless of species or origin." The device projected a soft hologram into Marcus's room, showing what looked like a three-dimensional map of his brain, certain areas pulsed with golden light. "When you chose to help me yesterday, these neural pathways activated at levels we have never before recorded in any species. You did not see an old human man in distress. You saw a conscious being in need of help, and you responded without hesitation." Marcus stared at the holographic brain, trying to process what he was being told. This quality, this universal empathy, is exactly what the Galactic Council has been seeking. For over 2 centuries, we have been searching for a species capable of serving as mediators between civilizations that have nothing in common except intelligence. We have found thousands of intelligent species, but none with the neural capacity for truly universal understanding. The hologram shifted, showing what looked like a vast chamber filled with beings of impossible variety. Some looked vaguely humanoid, others resembled nothing Marcus had ever imagined. They sat in organized groups around a central platform where figures gestured and communicated in ways that transcended language. The Galactic Council is not a government, Zarek's voice explained. It is a forum for peaceful communication between species that might otherwise never be able to understand each other. We have learned that intelligence alone is not sufficient for cooperation. Without empathy, without the ability to truly comprehend the experiences of others, even the most advanced civilizations inevitably fall into conflict. "But I'm just a kid," Marcus whispered to the device, though he wasn't sure if it could hear him. "Age is irrelevant," Zarek's voice replied, apparently responding to his words in real time. "What matters is capacity, and your capacity for empathy is unprecedented. But you are not alone, Marcus Chen. Our scans have detected similar patterns in other humans across your planet. Your species as a whole shows this remarkable trait, though it manifests most strongly in individuals like yourself." The holographic display changed again, showing what looked like a map of Earth dotted with points of light. Each light represents a human with neural pathways similar to yours, Zarek explained. "There are thousands of you scattered across your world. Children and adults from every culture and background. You are not unique, but you are part of something unique, a species with the potential to bridge gaps that have existed between civilizations for millions of years." Marcus felt overwhelmed. What does this mean for me? For my family? For everyone? "It means," Zarek's voice said gently, "that humanity is about to be invited to join something far larger than your world has ever imagined. But that invitation comes with choices and responsibilities that your species has never faced before." The device's glow intensified, and Marcus suddenly found himself looking not at his bedroom, but at what could only be the interior of a spacecraft. Zarek stood before him, no longer disguised as an elderly human. His true form was taller, more graceful, with skin that seemed to contain starlight and eyes that held depths Marcus couldn't fathom. "This is not a hologram," Zarek said, noting Marcus's confusion. "You are experiencing what we call a neural bridge, a temporary sharing of consciousness across space. Your mind is still in your bedroom, but your awareness is here, with me." Marcus looked around the incredible space. Curved walls displayed what looked like real-time images of Earth from multiple angles. Other beings moved through the area, some humanoid, others completely alien, all of them radiating the same sense of ancient wisdom he'd glimpsed in Zarek. How is this possible? It is one of the reasons your species is so valuable to the Council. You can literally share consciousness with beings who have nothing else in common with you. A new figure approached, something that looked like a cross between a praying mantis and a crystal formation, moving with precise, elegant gestures. "This is Keeper Zalara," Zarek explained. "She represents the Silicon Collective, a group of mineral-based intelligences from the Vegas system. Yesterday, when you helped me, she was observing through the neural link we maintain during away missions." The crystal being spoke, though Marcus heard the words in his mind rather than through his ears. "Your compassion resonated across the bridge, young human. For the first time in my existence, I understood what your people call feeling. It was profound." Marcus stared at Zalara, trying to comprehend a being made of living crystal who had learned about emotion through his act of kindness. "There are others who wish to meet you," Zarek said. "Representatives from dozens of species who have been waiting centuries for a race capable of true interspecies understanding." "But I don't understand," Marcus protested. "I just did CPR. It was basic first aid." "You chose to help when help was needed," Zalara's crystalline voice chimed in his mind. "This seems simple to you because it is intrinsic to your nature. But we have observed hundreds of species throughout their development. Most would have ignored my companion's distress or, at best, alerted their authorities to handle the situation. Direct personal intervention, especially toward an obvious outsider, is extraordinarily rare." Zarek gestured toward one of the viewing screens, which now showed Pioneer Courthouse Square from yesterday. Marcus watched himself kneeling beside Zarek's disguised form, performing chest compressions while the crowd gathered around them. "Observe their behavior," Zarek instructed. "See how they create distance, even while showing interest. They document rather than participate. They summon help rather than providing it directly. Even the woman who had called 911 had backed away after making the call. Others held up phones to record the event. A few had offered verbal encouragement, but only Marcus had actually touched the stranger, breathed into his lungs, fought to keep him alive. "This is not a criticism of your species," Zilara added quickly. "Self-preservation is logical and necessary, but your willingness to override those instincts for the sake of a stranger's welfare indicates a level of empathetic development that we have never encountered." "What happens now?" Marcus asked, though part of him was afraid of the answer. "Now," Zarek said, "we begin the most important conversation in your planet's history." The neural bridge began to fade, and Marcus found himself back in his bedroom holding the glowing communication device. But the experience had left him changed in ways he was only beginning to understand. "Tomorrow," Zarek's voice said through the device, "I will meet with you and your parents. It is time for your family to learn the truth about what you have become part of, and it is time for us to begin preparing your world for what comes next." Preparing for what? Professor Contact, Marcus Chen, official, undeniable, world-changing first contact. The device's glow faded, leaving Marcus alone in his dark room with thoughts too large for his 12-year-old mind to fully contain. He understood, with absolute certainty, that his life as he'd known it was over. Everything he'd thought he knew about the universe, about humanity's place in it, about his own significance, all of it had been transformed in the space of 2 conversations with a being from another world. But instead of fear, Marcus felt something unexpected. For the first time in his life, he sensed he was part of something genuinely important. Not just important to his family or his school or even his city, but important to the entire universe. He lay back on his bed and stared at the ceiling, trying to imagine what tomorrow would bring. His parents were going to think he'd lost his mind. His sister would either be terrified or jealous. His friends wouldn't believe him even if he could figure out how to explain it. But none of that seemed to matter as much as the larger truth Zarek had revealed. Humanity wasn't alone in the universe. More than that, humanity had something unique to offer, something that could change how intelligent species related to each other across the galaxy. Marcus fell asleep holding the dormant communication device, dreaming of crystalline beings and neural bridges and a vast chamber where impossible creatures gathered to share understanding across the cosmos. In his dreams, he stood at the center of it all, somehow managing to help them communicate despite their vast differences. When he woke the next morning, sunlight was streaming through his window and his mother was calling him for breakfast. For a moment, Marcus wondered if the previous night had been an elaborate dream. Then he saw the communication device on his nightstand, its surface showing faint traces of the flowing script he'd come to associate with Zarek's people. It had all been real, and today, everything would change. Marcus got dressed slowly, trying to figure out how to prepare his family for the impossible. How do you tell your parents that aliens exist? How do you explain that their 12-year-old son has become humanity's first ambassador to a galactic civilization? How do you make people believe in something that contradicts everything they think they know about reality? "Marcus!" his father called from downstairs. "Breakfast, coming," Marcus replied, slipping the communication device into his pocket. He paused at his bedroom door, taking one last look at the normal, ordinary space that had been his sanctuary for most of his life. When he returned to this room tonight, nothing would ever be the same again. Marcus walked downstairs to join his family, carrying secrets that would soon transform not just their lives, but the entire trajectory of human civilization. The boy who had stopped to help a stranger was about to discover that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness create the biggest changes in the universe. At breakfast, his parents seemed to sense something different about him, though they couldn't identify what had changed. His mother studied his face with the sharp attention she usually reserved for patients showing unusual symptoms. "You look like you didn't sleep well," she observed. "I slept fine," Marcus replied, which was technically true. He'd slept deeply and peacefully, filled with dreams of wonders beyond human imagination. "Are you feeling okay?" his father asked. "You seem different somehow." Marcus met his father's eyes and smiled. "I'm fine, Dad. Just thinking about how big the world really is." David Chen chuckled. "That's pretty deep thinking for a Sunday morning." "Yeah," Marcus agreed, touching the device in his pocket. "I guess it is." If only they knew how deep the universe actually was and how their son was about to help them discover depths they'd never dreamed possible. The doorbell rang at exactly 3 o'clock that Sunday afternoon, just as Zarek had promised through the communication device that morning. Marcus had spent the day trying to prepare his parents for what was coming, though he'd been careful not to reveal too much too quickly. "So this man you helped wants to meet with all of us?" his mother had asked over lunch. "That seems excessive for a simple thank you." "I think it's more than just thanking me," Marcus had replied. "He said something about wanting to discuss my future. Educational opportunities, quote, this had gotten his parents' attention." David and Linda Chen both believe strongly in education, and the idea that Marcus's act of kindness might lead to academic opportunities was something they could understand and support. What kind of educational opportunities David had pressed? "I'm not really sure," Marcus had admitted. He said he'd explain everything when he got here. Now, as the doorbell chimed through their modest Portland home, Marcus felt his heart racing. Everything was about to change, and his parents had no idea what they were about to walk into. "I'll get it," Marcus said, but his mother was already moving toward the front door. "We'll all answer it," Linda said firmly. "This is a family meeting." Marcus followed his parents to the entrance, Sarah trailing behind with the curiosity of a 9-year-old who sensed something important was happening. When Linda opened the door, Zarek stood on their porch, looking every bit the distinguished elderly gentleman he'd appeared to be during their first meeting. "Mr. and Mrs. Chen," Zarek said with a respectful nod. "Thank you for agreeing to see me. I am Zarek Thorm. Please, come in," David said, extending his hand for a shake. "Marcus has told us quite a bit about your meeting yesterday." Zarek's grip was firm but brief, and Marcus noticed his parents both seemed slightly surprised by the contact, as if they'd felt something unexpected in the handshake. "I hope he has conveyed the depth of my gratitude," Zarek said as they moved into the living room. "What your son did yesterday was extraordinary in ways you cannot yet imagine." Marcus and Sarah on the couch, their parents in the chairs facing them. Zarek remained standing, and Marcus caught the subtle way his eyes surveyed the room, taking in family photos and details that probably told him more about the Chen family than they realized. "Marcus mentioned you wanted to discuss educational opportunities," Linda began, getting straight to the point in her practical way. "Among other things, yes," Zarek agreed. "But first, I must share some information that will be difficult to accept. I ask only that you listen with open minds before making any judgments." David leaned forward slightly, his engineering mind clearly engaged. "What kind of information?" Zarek was quiet for a moment, and Marcus realized the alien was probably calculating exactly how much truth to reveal and how quickly to reveal it. Finally, he seemed to reach a decision. "I am not entirely what I appear to be," Zarek said carefully. "My presence on Earth is part of a larger mission to evaluate your species for possible inclusion in an interstellar alliance." The silence that followed was profound. Marcus watched his parents process Zarek's words, saw the moment when their brains rejected what they'd heard as impossible. "I'm sorry," Linda said with the polite firmness she used when dealing with confused patients. "Did you just say you're from another planet?" "I did," Zarek replied calmly. "I understand this is difficult to accept, but the events of yesterday have accelerated a timeline that was meant to unfold over several more months." David stood up, his face showing the mix of concern and irritation that usually preceded his most serious parental interventions. "Thorn, I appreciate your gratitude toward Marcus, but I think this meeting is over." "Dad, wait," Marcus interjected. "Just listen to what he has to say." "Marcus, this man is clearly having some kind of episode," his mother said, though she kept her voice gentle. "Mr. Thorn, have you been taking any new medications?" "Sometimes cardiac events can be followed by periods of confusion or delusion." Zarek smiled sadly. "I expected this reaction. It is perfectly reasonable given your frame of reference. May I show you something that might help you understand? I think you should leave," David said, moving toward the door. Please, Zarek said, and something in his voice made everyone freeze. Give me 1 minute to demonstrate that I am telling the truth. If what I show you does not convince you, I will leave immediately and never contact your family again. Marcus pulled the communication device from his pocket. Mom, Dad, you need to see this. His parents stared at the glowing object in their son's hands, their faces cycling through confusion, disbelief, and the first stirrings of genuine alarm. What is that? Sarah whispered, her 9-year-old wonder overriding any fear she might have felt. It's how Zarek has been talking to me, Marcus explained. From his ship. His ship, David repeated flatly. Currently positioned approximately 200 miles above Earth's surface, Zarek confirmed. Hidden by technology your science cannot yet detect. Marcus activated the device and it immediately began projecting the holographic display he'd seen the night before. The living room filled with three-dimensional images of Earth as seen from space, but with details no human satellite could capture. This is a real-time view of your planet, Zarek explained as the Chen family stared in stunned silence. You can see the Aurora station passing over the North Atlantic, the weather system developing off the coast of Japan, the aurora activity beginning near your North Pole. Linda reached out tentatively to touch the hologram, her hand passing through the projected image of Earth. This is impossible, she breathed. Impossible by your current understanding of physics, Zarek agreed. But your species is on the verge of several technological breakthroughs that will make much of what seems impossible today seem elementary tomorrow. The holographic display shifted, showing the interior of what could only be a spacecraft. Other beings moved through the space, clearly not human, but obviously intelligent and purposeful in their actions. Those are my colleagues, Zarek explained, representatives from several species that form the core of what you might call a galactic community. We have been observing Earth for over 2 centuries, waiting for the right moment to initiate contact. Why now? David asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Because yesterday your son demonstrated a quality we have been searching for across the galaxy for over 3,000 years, Zarek replied. The capacity for universal empathy. I don't understand, Linda said. Most intelligent species develop empathy only for their own kind, Zarek explained. It is an evolutionary advantage that promotes survival within groups, but humans have evolved beyond this limitation. You have the neurological capacity to genuinely understand and care about the welfare of beings who are completely unlike yourselves. The holographic display focused on Marcus's brain scan from the previous day, showing the golden pathways that had lit up during his encounter with Zarek. These neural patterns activated when Marcus chose to help me, Zarek continued. He did not see an elderly human in distress. He saw a conscious being in need of aid, and he responded without calculating risk to himself or potential benefit from his actions. Sarah looked at her brother with new respect. You're like a superhero, she said. Not a superhero, Zarek corrected gently, but perhaps something more important. A bridge between species that might otherwise never understand each other. What exactly are you proposing? David asked, his engineer's mind clearly working to process the implications. Humanity is being invited to join the Galactic Council, Zarek replied. Not as subjects or junior partners, but as mediators. Your species' capacity for universal empathy makes you uniquely qualified to facilitate communication between civilizations that have fundamental differences in biology, psychology, and philosophy. And Marcus would be part of this? Marcus would be one of Earth's first ambassadors, Zarek confirmed, along with others who show similar neural patterns. We have identified approximately 12,000 humans worldwide with the necessary capabilities. 12,000, Marcus repeated, trying to imagine that many people with abilities like his own. Children and adults from every culture and continent, Zarek nodded. Your species' diversity is another valuable asset. The Council includes civilizations that think in ways no single human culture could comprehend, but collectively, humanity has the cognitive range to serve as translators between almost any two species. Hundreds of different beings gathered in organized groups while human figures moved between them, apparently facilitating communication. This is a projection of what the Council could become with human participation, Zarek explained. For the first time in galactic history, truly universal cooperation might be possible. What would this mean for Earth? David asked. Accelerated technological development, access to resources beyond your current imagination, and protection from threats your world doesn't yet know exist, Zarek replied. But also responsibilities and challenges that will transform human civilization. What kind of threats? Linda asked, her protective instincts clearly engaged. The galaxy is not entirely peaceful, Zarek admitted. There are species that view other intelligent life as competition to be eliminated rather than potential partners to be understood. The Council serves as both a forum for cooperation and a mutual defense alliance. You're talking about war, David said. I am talking about the prevention of war, Zarek corrected. The Council's primary mission is to resolve conflicts before they become violent. When that fails, we work together to contain aggressors before they can threaten peaceful civilizations. And you want our children to be part of this, Linda said, her voice tight with concern. I want your children to help create a future where different forms of intelligence can coexist without fear, Zarek replied. But the choice belongs to you and to them. No one will be forced to participate. Marcus looked at his parents, seeing the struggle in their faces as they tried to balance their natural protectiveness with the incredible opportunity Zarek was describing. What happens if we say no? He asked. Then humanity continues on its current path, Zarek said. Eventually, you will develop the technology to detect our presence and the presence of other species. First contact will happen regardless, but it might occur under less favorable circumstances. How much time do we have to decide? David asked. The Council has scheduled a formal first contact event for 6 months from now, Zarek replied. Before then, we would like to work with volunteers like Marcus to establish preliminary communication protocols and cultural exchange programs. The timeline is not negotiable, Zarek said gently. Other species have become aware of our interest in humanity. Some of them do not share the Council's commitment to peaceful contact. The implications of that statement hung heavy in the room. Marcus felt the weight of forces beyond his understanding pressing down on his family, on his entire world. Can we think about it? Marcus asked. Of course, Zarek agreed. But I must ask that you not discuss this conversation with anyone outside your immediate family. Premature disclosure could create panic and make peaceful contact much more difficult. Sarah, who had been unusually quiet during the adult conversation, suddenly spoke up. Are there kids like me on other planets? Zarek's stern expression softened as he looked at the 9-year-old. There are young beings on many worlds, Sarah. Most of them are very different from you, but all of them are curious about the universe, just like you are. Do they play games? They have activities they enjoy, though they might not look like games to you, Zarek replied. One of the hopes for human involvement in the Council is that your species might help different civilizations find common ground through shared experiences like play and creativity. Marcus saw his parents exchange another of their silent looks, and he could almost hear their mental conversation about the implications for both their children. If Marcus does become involved, Linda said carefully, what kind of training or preparation would be required? Initially, neural conditioning to facilitate communication across species barriers, Zarek replied. Much of it can be done through neural bridge technology, like what Marcus experienced last night. Last night? David asked, looking at his son. Marcus felt heat rise in his cheeks. Zarek showed me the ship. Just mentally, my body stayed here. You've already begun the process, his mother said, and Marcus couldn't tell if she was angry or impressed. Preliminary contact only, Zarek assured her. Nothing that would cause any permanent changes without your explicit consent. The communication device in Marcus's hands began to pulse with a gentle light, and Zarek glanced at it with what looked like concern. I must return to the ship, he said. There are developments that require my immediate attention. What kind of developments? David asked. Other species are accelerating their own first contact timelines, Zarek replied. Some of them do not share our commitment to gradual, peaceful revelation. You mean other aliens might contact Earth before you're ready, Marcus said. It is a possibility we must prepare for, Zarek confirmed, which makes decisions about human participation in the Council more urgent than we had hoped. He moved toward the door, then paused and looked back at the Chen family. I know this is overwhelming, he said. But please remember that what Marcus did yesterday was remarkable not because it was planned or calculated, but because it came naturally to him. Your species' greatest strength is your instinctive compassion for other living beings. The Council needs that strength, but more importantly, the galaxy needs it. After Zarek left, the Chen family sat in stunned silence for several minutes. The holographic device had gone dormant, but its presence on the coffee table served as undeniable proof that their conversation with an alien representative had actually happened. This is really real, Sarah finally said. Yeah, Marcus agreed. It really is. What do we do now? Linda asked. David ran his hands through his hair, a gesture Marcus recognized as his father's way of dealing with engineering problems that seemed to have no clear solution. I think, David said slowly, we need to talk about this as a family. All the implications, all the risks, all the potential benefits. Are you considering saying yes? Marcus asked. His parents looked at each other for a long moment. Honestly, Linda said, I think we'd be crazy to say yes, but I also think we might be crazy to say no. It's the biggest decision in human history, David added, and somehow it's ended up in our living room. Marcus nodded, understanding the weight of responsibility that had settled on his 12-year-old shoulders. He'd performed CPR on a stranger 2 days ago, and now his family was being asked to help determine humanity's future relationship with the rest of the galaxy. Whatever we decide, he said, I think we should decide it together. His parents smiled at him, and Marcus realized that no matter how much his world was about to change, some things would always stay the same. His family would still be his anchor, his source of strength and wisdom, but now they would all be navigating uncharted waters together, with the stars themselves as their destination. 3 days after Zarek's visit, Marcus was sitting in his morning algebra class when every electronic device in Jefferson Middle School simultaneously displayed the same message in dozens of languages. Attention inhabitants of Earth. First contact protocols are now in effect. The message appeared on smartboards, tablets, phones, laptops, and even the ancient desktop computer in the school library. It lasted exactly 30 seconds before vanishing, leaving behind classrooms full of confused students and increasingly panicked teachers. Marcus felt his stomach drop as he realized what had happened. Other species weren't waiting for the Council's carefully planned timeline. Someone else had just announced their presence to the entire world. His phone buzzed with a text from his mother. Come home now. Emergency. Around him, Marcus could hear other phones ringing and buzzing as parents across the city reached the same conclusion he had. Something huge was happening and they needed their families together. Mr. Chen, his teacher, Miss Rodriguez, called out, Did you see that message too? Yeah, Marcus replied, gathering his books. My mom wants me to come home. I think that's probably a good idea, Miss Rodriguez agreed. Class, I think we're going to dismiss early today. Check your phones for messages from your parents. The hallways filled with students, all of them talking at once about the mysterious message. Marcus heard fragments of conversation as he pushed through the crowd toward his locker. Probably just a prank. My dad says the government's been hiding aliens for years. End of the world, I swear. Hackers has to be hackers. Marcus grabbed his backpack and headed for the exit, but he was stopped by a familiar voice calling his name. Marcus, wait up. He turned to see his best friend Jake pushing through the crowd, his face flushed with excitement and worry. Did you see that? Jake demanded. That message? What do you think it means? I don't know, Marcus lied, hating himself for it. Probably just some kind of computer virus or something. My mom's freaking out, Jake continued. She wants me to come straight home. She thinks it might be terrorists or something. Yeah, mine too, Marcus agreed. I should go. Text me later, okay? This is insane. Marcus nodded and continued toward the parking lot where his mother was waiting in their Honda, her face grim with worry. He climbed into the passenger seat and immediately saw that she was holding the communication device Zarek had given them. It's been going off constantly for the last 20 minutes, Linda said as she pulled out of the school parking lot. I think our timeline just got accelerated. At home, they found David pacing the living room while Sarah sat on the couch, looking smaller and more scared than Marcus had seen her since she'd fallen off her bike and broken her arm 2 years earlier. The message went out worldwide, David reported without preamble. Every electronic device on the planet simultaneously. The internet is going crazy. People are calling it everything from a hoax to an invasion. The communication device in Linda's hands suddenly blazed with light, and Zarek's voice filled the room. Chen family, we have a situation that requires immediate discussion. May I transport Marcus to the ship for an emergency briefing? Transport him? Linda's voice cracked. What does that mean? A temporary matter transmission, Zarek explained. His consciousness and physical form would be relocated to our vessel for approximately 1 hour, then returned safely to your home. I understand your concern, Zarek's voice continued, but events are unfolding much faster than we anticipated. The message you saw was not sent by the Council. Marcus felt his blood turn cold. Who sent it? A species called the Dominion, Zarek replied. They believe that all younger civilizations should be conquered and absorbed rather than invited to participate as equals. They've been monitoring our activities around Earth and decided to force premature contact. Are we in danger? Sarah asked in a small voice. Not immediately, Zarek assured her. But the situation is becoming complicated very quickly. The message was designed to cause confusion and panic, making your world more vulnerable to Dominion manipulation. What kind of manipulation, AAA saviors, Zarek explained? They'll claim that the Council represents a threat to Earth and offer protection in exchange for submission to Dominion authority. And people might believe them, Linda said, understanding immediately. Humans are naturally suspicious of authority, Zarek agreed. The Dominion is very skilled at exploiting that tendency. They'll portray themselves as liberators while painting the Council as oppressors. Marcus looked at his family, seeing the same realization in all their faces. The careful, gradual introduction to galactic civilization that Zarek had described was no longer possible. Earth had been thrust into an interstellar conflict whether they wanted it or not. What can we do? Marcus asked. The Council is implementing emergency first contact protocols, Zarek replied. We need human representatives who can help explain the situation to your world leaders and general population. People who can speak for your species with authority and authenticity.
You want Marcus to become some kind of spokesperson? David said.
I want Marcus and others like him to help prevent a catastrophe, Zarek corrected. The Dominion's usual strategy is to create chaos, then position themselves as the solution. If they succeed, humanity will lose its independence before most people even understand what's happening. The communication device projected another hologram, this time showing Earth with multiple spacecraft approaching from different directions. Dominion advanced scouts are already entering your solar system, Zarek explained. They'll arrive within 72 hours. We need to establish legitimate first contact before they can begin their psychological manipulation. How? Linda asked. Public revelation of the Council's presence along with human advocates who can explain the true situation, Zarek replied. Marcus and the others we've identified are the most qualified to serve as intermediaries. 12,000 humans with similar neural patterns, remember? We've been in preliminary contact with about 300 of them over the past week. Most are adults, but there are several other young people like Marcus. Sarah looked at her brother with wide eyes. You're really going to save the world? I'm going to try to help, Marcus corrected, though the magnitude of what Zarek was asking was starting to sink in. The first step, Zarek continued, is a global broadcast explaining the situation. But it needs to come from humans, speaking to other humans. The Council will provide the platform and technology, but the message must be authentically human. When? David asked. Tomorrow, Zarek replied. The Dominion ships will arrive the day after that. We cannot wait any longer. The room fell silent as the Chen family absorbed the implications. Marcus felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders like a physical burden. What exactly would I have to do? He asked. Join with the other human representatives in a global address, Zarek explained. Explain what you've learned about the Council and the choice facing humanity. Help people understand that this isn't an invasion or a conquest, but an invitation to join something larger than any single world. And if the Dominion convinces people that you're lying, Linda asked. Then humanity will spend the next several centuries as subjects rather than partners, Zarek replied grimly. The Dominion doesn't destroy the species they conquer. They simply reshape them into compliant vassals. Marcus thought about Jake and his other friends, about his teachers and neighbors, about all the people in Portland and around the world who were probably scared and confused by the day's events. They deserve to know the truth, even if that truth was more complicated than anyone wanted to deal with. I'll do it, he said. Marcus, his mother began. I'll do it, he repeated, looking directly at his parents. But only if you guys support me. I can't handle this alone. David and Linda exchanged another of their silent conversations, years of marriage allowing them to communicate volumes with just a look. We'll all do it, Linda said finally. If you're representing humanity, you're representing this family too. And me, Sarah added. I want to help save the world too. Zarek's voice carried a note of relief. Thank you, all of you. Transport will arrive in 1 hour to bring you to the coordination site. Where are we going? Marcus asked. Geneva, Zarek replied. The Council has established a temporary facility there where all the human representatives can meet and prepare for tomorrow's broadcast. After Zarek signed off, the Chen family spent the hour preparing for a trip they could never have imagined taking. Marcus packed a small bag while trying to process the fact that he was about to meet 300 other people with abilities similar to his own. His parents made phone calls to their employers in Sarah's school, explaining that there was a family emergency that would keep them away for several days. It wasn't exactly a lie, Marcus reflected. This definitely qualified as an emergency, and it definitely affected the whole family. As they waited for whatever form of transportation Zarek would provide, Marcus found himself thinking about the moment 2 days earlier when he'd knelt beside a dying stranger in Pioneer Courthouse Square. He'd performed CPR because it was the right thing to do without any thought of consequences or rewards. Now that simple act of compassion was rippling outward in ways he could never have predicted, ultimately leading to this moment when he would help decide humanity's place in the galaxy. Are you scared? Sarah asked, sitting beside him on the couch. Yeah, Marcus admitted. But I'm also excited. We're going to meet people from other worlds, Sarah. We're going to see things no human has ever seen before. Will they look like Zarek? Some of them, maybe. But Zarek told me there are beings made of crystal, and others that look like living light. The universe is full of intelligence that doesn't look anything like us. Sarah considered this. Do you think they'll like us? I think some of them already do, Marcus replied. That's why we have a chance to join their club instead of just being conquered by the mean ones. A soft chime filled the room, and the communication device announced, "Transport is ready. Please prepare for molecular displacement." Molecular displacement? David asked nervously. Think of it as a very advanced form of teleportation, Zarek's voice explained. You'll feel a brief tingling sensation, then you'll be in Geneva. The Chen family stood together in their living room, holding hands as the air around them began to shimmer. Marcus felt a strange buzzing in his bones, like the feeling of a dentist's drill, but everywhere at once. The last thing he saw of his familiar world was their family cat, Mr. Whiskers, watching the proceedings with typical feline indifference. Then the buzzing reached a crescendo, and Marcus found himself standing in a vast chamber filled with people of all ages, ethnicities, and backgrounds. They all had one thing in common, the same slightly overwhelmed expression he was sure he wore on his own face. "Welcome to the Emergency Human Representative Assembly," announced a woman who looked to be in her 40s, speaking with an accent Marcus couldn't identify. "I'm Dr. Elena Vasquez, and like all of you, I've recently learned that our universe is much larger than we thought." Marcus looked around the incredible space they'd been transported to. The walls seemed to be made of some kind of living crystal that pulsed with soft light. Other humans moved through the area, some talking in small groups, others standing alone and trying to process their new reality. "The next 24 hours, Dr. Vasquez continued, will determine the future of human civilization. We're going to work together to craft a message that explains our situation to 8 billion people who have no context for understanding it." "No pressure," muttered a teenager standing near Marcus, and several people laughed despite the gravity of their situation. "Actually, Dr. Vasquez replied with a smile, "there's enormous pressure, but that's why we're here together. No one person could handle this responsibility alone. But 300 humans working together with the guidance of the Galactic Council, we might just be able to change history." Marcus felt his parents' hands squeeze his own, and he realized that despite everything, he felt ready for whatever came next. He'd acted from compassion 3 days ago, and that compassion had led him here. Now it was time to see where it would lead the rest of humanity. The global broadcast was scheduled for 12 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time, which meant that somewhere around the world it would be prime time, morning news, or late-night television for most of Earth's population. Marcus stood with the other human representatives on a platform that seemed to be made of solidified starlight, looking out at recording equipment that definitely hadn't been manufactured on Earth. Zarek stood nearby along with representatives from a dozen other council species. Marcus had met some of them over the past 24 hours. Being so different from humans that communication required the neural bridge technology just to exchange basic concepts. Yet somehow, through that technology, he'd felt their genuine care for humanity's well-being and their respect for the choice Earth was about to make. "Remember," Dr. Vasquez said to the assembled group, "we're not trying to convince anyone of anything. We're simply explaining the situation as clearly as possible and trusting humanity to make the right decision." "What if they don't?" asked David Kim, a software engineer from Seoul who had become one of the group's informal leaders. "What if they choose the Dominion?" "Then we'll have to live with that choice," Zarek replied. "The Council does not impose its will on species that prefer other paths. But we hope that when humans understand the true options available, they will choose cooperation over subjugation." Marcus felt his stomach churning with nervousness. In less than 10 minutes, he would be addressing every human being on the planet. His words would be translated into hundreds of languages and broadcast through every communication medium on Earth. The weight of that responsibility felt almost crushing. "You don't have to say much," his mother reminded him, sensing his anxiety. "Just be yourself and speak from the heart. That's what got us into this situation in the first place," Marcus replied, but he was smiling as he said it. "And it's what will get us through it," his father added. "You trusted your instincts when you helped Zarek, and those instincts were right. Trust them again now." A soft tone chimed through the facility, indicating that they had 5 minutes until the broadcast began. Around the platform, council members took their positions at monitoring stations, ready to transmit the signal to every electronic device on Earth. Marcus looked at his fellow representatives, seeing his own mixture of fear and determination reflected in their faces. They ranged in age from 11 to 67, came from dozens of countries, and spoke many different languages. But they all shared the same neural patterns that had made them capable of truly understanding beings completely unlike themselves. Dr. Vasquez stepped forward to the central podium, her voice calm despite the magnitude of the moment. "People of Earth," she began, "my name is Elena Vasquez, and I am speaking to you from a facility provided by what we have learned to call the Galactic Council. I know this sounds impossible, but I am joined here by representatives from several species that have been observing our world for over 2 centuries. The platform behind her shimmered, and suddenly Zarek appeared in his true form, tall, graceful, with skin that seemed to contain starlight and eyes that held depths no human gaze could match. Beside him materialized Keeper Zalara, her crystalline structure catching and refracting the light into spectacular patterns. "We are not invaders," Zarek said, his voice carrying clearly despite the obvious differences in his physiology. "We are representatives of a community of intelligent species that has existed for over 50,000 of your years. We have come to Earth because your species has demonstrated a quality that is extraordinarily rare in the galaxy." Dr. Vasquez nodded and continued. 3 days ago, a 12-year-old boy named Marcus Chen saw a stranger in distress and chose to help, without thought for his own safety or potential reward. That simple act of compassion activated neural pathways that we now know represent humanity's greatest strength, the ability to extend empathy beyond the boundaries of your own species. "I just did what anyone would do," he said, his voice carrying across the broadcast equipment to 8 billion people. "I saw someone who needed help and I helped. That's not special. That's just being human." "But it is special," Keeper Zalara interjected, her crystalline voice somehow conveying warmth despite its alien nature. "In 3,000 years of contact with developing civilizations, we have never encountered a species with your capacity for universal compassion. Most intelligent beings develop empathy only for their own kind. You have evolved beyond that limitation." Dr. Vasquez resumed control of the presentation. "The Council has invited humanity to join their community as mediators, beings who can help different species understand each other despite fundamental differences in biology, psychology, and philosophy. This is not conquest or absorption, this is partnership." The display behind them shifted, showing the vast chamber Marcus had seen in his visions, filled with impossible beings working together in harmony. "However," Dr. Vasquez continued, her tone growing more serious, "not every intelligent species in the galaxy shares the Council's commitment to voluntary cooperation." Yesterday's global message was sent by a group called the Dominion, which believes that younger civilization should be conquered and controlled rather than invited to participate as equals. On cue, the display showed Dominion spacecraft, sleek, predatory vessels approaching Earth's solar system. "The Dominion will arrive tomorrow," Zarek announced. "They will present themselves as humanity's protectors, claiming that the Council represents a threat to your independence. They will offer safety in exchange for submission to their authority." "We're not here to tell you which choice to make," Dr. Vasquez said. "We're here to ensure that you understand the true nature of both options. The Council offers partnership with responsibilities and challenges, but also growth, knowledge, and genuine freedom. The Dominion offers safety with the price of eternal subservience." Marcus stepped forward again, feeling the weight of every word he was about to speak. "I know this is scary," he said, looking directly into the camera that would carry his image to screens around the world. 3 days ago, I didn't know aliens existed. Now I'm supposed to help decide humanity's future. But here's what I've learned. The universe is full of different kinds of intelligence, and most of them want the same things we do: safety for their families, opportunities for their children, and the chance to be part of something bigger than themselves. He paused, thinking of his sister Sarah and his friend Jake, of his teachers and neighbors and all the people who were probably watching this broadcast with confusion and fear. "The Council isn't perfect," Marcus continued. "They've made mistakes, and they have conflicts and problems just like we do. But they're trying to build something better, a way for different species to work together instead of fighting or conquering each other. The Dominion has given up on that dream. They think the only way to have peace is to make everyone the same, by force." Vasquez nodded and took over again. "Over the next 24 hours, you'll hear many voices offering different perspectives on this situation. Listen to all of them, but remember that the choice belongs to humanity as a whole. No single government or organization can make this decision for our entire species." "How will we know what humanity has chosen?" asked another representative, a teacher from Brazil named Carlos Santos. "The same neural patterns that allow for universal empathy also create what we call a collective resonance," Zarek explained. "When a species with your capabilities reaches consensus on a fundamental choice, it creates a signal that can be detected across vast distances. The Council will know humanity's decision when humanity makes it. And if we choose the Dominion? Dr. Vasquez asked. Then the Council will withdraw, and you will face the consequences of that choice, Zarek replied sadly. We will not interfere with a species' right to self-determination even when we believe they are making a mistake. 1, 2-year-old human child rescues elderly alien from cardiac arrest. 1 day later, his world is transformed. HFY.